Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back to this course on architectural thesis. My name is Dr. Vishal Chettry and I am working as an assistant professor in the Department of Architecture, Planning and Design at IIT Varanasi. So today in this presentation I will cover the topic related to the site study and site analysis. So what are those factors by which you can complete your site analysis in detail. So we will cover those details about the site. So welcome to this presentation. The content of this particular presentation will start with why site selection matters in thesis, what are different 4 pillars of site selection, the legal boundaries of thesis, land ownership and tenure, zoning and land use regulations, building bylaws and local regulations that are there for your site, environmental and heritage constraints, functional factors, can the site support design, accessibility and mobility, topography, terrain and soil condition, climate and orientation of the particular site, services and utilities related to the site, compatibility with surroundings, synthesizing the criteria, that is creating a checklist for the site analysis. So all the information that we have gathered till here can be used, or these can be tentative list of data that has to be collected from the site, and with this will form the checklist for your site analysis, and then the conclusion and the content for the next presentation will be shared with you. So to give you a recap of what was learned in the previous presentation, we try to understand the critical role of case studies as the empirical foundation for a strong architectural thesis project. A systematic method for selecting cases emphasizing the need for clear and relevant criteria was outlined. The best practices for documentation and effective visual communication of the case studies was also gathered. The strategies for moving beyond the simple observation to a detailed case studies was highlighted in the previous presentation. A comprehensive architectural checklist was prepared for your detailed case study selection, and similarly we will try to develop a checklist for the site study also. The overall aim of the last presentation was to ensure that the case studies are analytical as well as they are relevant, and they are not just descriptive of what was observed in the case study. So it is a critical study of the built built environment. So why does site selection matters in architectural thesis or in any project? Because the site that you choose defines the context, defines the scale as well as scope for the project. So this is why site holds an immense importance in architectural thesis. It is not just you can select any random site and start with the design process. There is always these informations that are there with the respective site. So this is why selecting a site is very important in this case. So site characteristics define scale and scope. Small urban plots suit compact design, while large peripheral site allows for campus or landscape integration. So these are some information that you can get from the site. It determines the nature of spatial intervention, material selection and the environmental strategy as well as the structural logic that is applied to the design. So what sort of foundation and other details are required for the particular project is only based on the site condition. So if your site has black cotton soil, so in that case probably you will not go with the pad footing or with the individual footing for the site in that case. So you have to go for specialized foundation for such black cotton soil. So likewise for different soil conditions the foundation differs. So this is where the structural logic to the building also is understood based on the site requirements. So site characteristics, shapes, design logic influence the orientation, even the ventilation to the building. So orientation, that means whether mostly we try to keep our make our design or the front building to be north face, so that we can allow optimum or maximum diffuse lighting within the building through the north direction. So likewise we try to, in Indian context, especially in southern India or in central India, we try to block or we try to limit access of sunlight from the western and southern direction, because the sunlight is very harsh from these directions in Indian context. So we try to allow sunlight from either east or north direction in central or southern India. But as we go towards the northern part of the country, that is towards Leh Ladakh or towards Shimla, or even in northeastern states like Arunachal and other states like Meghalaya, Nagaland, there we try to allow sunlight maximum from the southern or western direction, because the sunlight that we get from these directions are from longer hours, and there is a direct sunlight that penetrates within the building from this direction. So that is how climate and the orientation, climate actually decides on the orientation of the building, and as well as to the ventilation. So sloping sites may inspire terrace level or split floors. Local materials and soil conditions impact the structural decision of the project. So why site selection matters in a thesis is because the site is not just a location for the building, it is an active participant in the design process. So most of the, as already mentioned, the design decisions that we take for the building is dependent on the case study, but also it is dependent on the site that is selected. For example, if there is a river that is passing through the southern side of the site, so we will have those spaces which if we are designing a recreational facility, so we will try to keep such kind of spaces from where the views can be captured towards from the southern direction. So all our windows or maybe the viewpoints can be kept towards the southern direction. So likewise, if there is a very very huge factory near to our site in the west direction, so we will try to obstruct placing windows or placing all these openings from the western direction, so that we block the view towards those factories, or will not will not allow the smoke to enter the building from the western direction. So try to block that facade. So likewise, the design decision depends on the site condition. A mismatched site leads to a forced design, whereas a well-suited site offers organic evolution of ideas. So there are 4 pillars for site selection. So the first is your contextual factors, contractual factors, functional factors, and design driven factors. So what are contextual factors? These are the context to the site. For example, geography, climate, culture, urban character, socio-political realities. These are contextual factors of the site, and these define the physical and cultural setting of the site. So contractual factors include ownership, zoning, regulatory terms, legal compliance. So all this information related to the site are called as contractual factors, and they define the legal boundaries for your project. Functional factors like accessibility, usability, terrain, utilities, safety and infrastructure, all these information related from the site are called as functional factors. And design driven factors are symbolism, experiential potential, typological uniqueness, and identity creation. So this thesis is not just a speculative fantasy, it's expected to align with the real world urban, ecological and legal system. So that is why these factors are very important in the site selection process. So the legal boundaries of thesis is slightly, a glimpse to it was provided in the previous presentation. So these are some kind of legal and regulatory framework for any project related to the site condition. So based on the site, what is the legal ownership of that site? One has to be aware of that. So when a juror or examiner will ask who is the owner of that site, so you have to you should be able to provide this information, zoning and land use. So whether if you are designing a commercial building, but you have selected a site in a residential category, so that is not an ideal site for the project. So you have to so the site selection becomes wrong in this process. Building codes and building bylaws, because this will help you define the permissible built up space for your project. Developmental control regulation, that is the DCRs, provide you city specific policies which affect the form, density and urban integration for the building. Conservation, heritage and environmental restrictions, like if your site is near to heritage monuments, so there will be some restrictions that are there based on the bylaws, heritage bylaws. Likewise CRZ, that is coastal regulation zone, or if your site is near to a forest, there will be some guidelines related to that, or if it is very near to airport, so there will be some height restriction that is there on the particular building. So likewise there are some legal aspects related to the specific site, so you have to follow all this when you design the building. Then is the land ownership and tenure detail. It confirms that who actually owns the land before you commit to the site. So this information has to be there with you, because when you design a government building in a private land, so that may not be a good site to select for a project. That means you have not done your site analysis in detail. So this gives a perception to the examiner or to the juror that the site analysis work is not done in detail. So there are different types of land holding as mentioned here. That first is freehold, that means full legal ownership with the right to sell, lease or mortgage, ideal for thesis due to its clear authority. So next is leasehold, right to use land for a specific period like 30 or 40 years or 99 years for that particular building, often with usage restriction outlined in the lease agreement. So these are different type of land ownership. Then third is institutional land owned by the government bodies, trust or PSUs. Then fourth is enclosed land or informal settlements. So all these informal settlements or slums that we see within our cities are all built on the enclosed or on the government land most of the time. So when you do a slum rehabilitation kind of project, you have to be aware of the ownership detail of that land before you proceed. Then zoning and land use regulations, these are also very essential, as the site that you selected falls within the master plan of that city. So you have to understand where is that site exactly located, and the typology of that building corresponds to the land use that is selected for the site. So if you are designing a residential project which may be a township, or which may be a group residence project, or maybe a gated community, so all that can only be designed in a residential land use zone. So likewise, if there is any commercial building or public semi-public building, so all these, there are certain land use zones that are created, and accordingly you can build those buildings in those land use zones. So zoning dictates the permissible use, it determines the FAR and FSI, it also determines the setbacks and open space and the density norms for the particular building. So zoning acts as a primary realism filter, ensuring the site legally permits the intended use. Any proposal to change land use or challenge the zoning norms is requires strong urban design justification, stakeholder analysis and socio-spatial relevance. So that is why you should select a site which falls under the relevant land use category. Building bylaws and local regulations are the legal design standards that regulate how construction should occur within the city or municipality. Their purpose is to ensure that the building meets the minimum standard of safety as they are mentioned in the DCR, that is Development Control Rule, and it will be different for the different states. And if you are not able to get the details about your project in that DCR, you can refer the National Building Code, that is NBC 2016, which is prepared by the Bureau of Indian Standards, and the same information there in the NBC helps you determine the safety or ensure the safety of users within the building. So the key characteristics include bylaws vary from one urban local body to another, so you have to be aware of where or in which state are you going to build that particular building, while the NBC, that is NBC 2016, provides a national framework for individual cities. Often we refer to the Development Control Rules or DCR, that is prepared by the development authorities like DDA, MMRDA or BBMP, like that. The key parameters to consider in this case are the minimum plot size for the respective project, setbacks and margins, staircase width and corridor dimension, light and ventilation norms, basement, steel and terrace rules, and then the green building norm if it is applicable for the project. The environmental and heritage constraints related to the site has to be understood. If your site is very near to sea, then at least you should follow this CRZ, that is, there should not be a permanent building or permanent foundation for the building that is designed within the 500 meter of the high tide line near the along the sea, rivers or lakes. So this has to be followed strictly, and you should not promote illegal construction in these sensitive zones. Then next is your forest and eco-sensitive zones. So there are certain zones that are demarcated within forest also, like buffer zone or the core area. So likewise you have to select these zones and then design the building in those spaces accordingly. Then the other is heritage constraint. As already mentioned, ASI these days have come up with heritage bylaws, and within that bylaws the different guidelines are being set up. For example, prohibited zone, that means there should be no construction that should be done within the 100 meters of the protected monument. Regulated zone, that is limited and controlled construction as per the bylaws that are suggested within the heritage bylaws of that particular heritage monuments are allowed within the 100 to 200 meters of that project, of that heritage monument. So all this information you should collect if your site falls or which is very near to the heritage protected monuments. Then there are some factors that will help you determine whether the site supports the design or not. For example, can the proposed structure be built feasibly given the terrain and soil? So based on the terrain and the soil condition, the structure that you are imagining, is it possible or not? So for that you have to do a study related to the soil and terrain. Will the site allow the design to be used as intended by the target users? So this will also be gathered from the site analysis. Does it support accessibility, safety, comfort and functionality of the users or not? So these questions, when you answer, if you get an answer to these questions, you will be able to get or understand the site is best for that kind of project or not. So the key functional factors that you should keep in mind is access. Is the site reachable by vehicle or emergency services like fire tenders or ambulances and pedestrians? Topography and soil. Can the land support foundation as it is prone to erosion, flooding or instability? Proximity to services. Are electricity, water, drainage and internet easily available near to a site? Sun, slope, drainage and safety, these are important factors which help you design the building. Addressing functional factors shows that the design is not just imaginative but also constructible. This is why site analysis and these factors, especially access, topography, proximity to services and the other site context like sun, slope, drainage and safety becomes paramount in this case. Then accessibility and mobility. So accessibility determines how easily people and services can reach and navigate a site, impacting usability, safety and function within that particular site. So who needs access? The users, for example staff, visitors and people with disabilities, emergency, delivery and service vehicles. So for these purpose we need an access to the site. So the key factors that has to be thought of in this case is the public transport link. How is public transport route linked to your site? So that has to be understood. Road hierarchy and connectivity, physical barriers that are there in and around the site, on-site movement, parking, where will be the parking denoted within the site, whether it will be basement or it will be on-site or surface level parking, and if it's the mix of both, so how much percentage of surface and how much percentage of basement. And then also basement parking is determined based on the soil condition of that space. For hospitals, schools, markets and transit hubs, accessibility is essential. Use tools like ISO widths, flow diagram and entry or exit mapping to assess it. And partly the inferences, all these can be gathered from the case study also, for how the building responds to these requirements from the case study. Accordingly you have to think of its relevance for your project in your respective site also. Then the other detail includes topography, terrain and soil. So the topography, terrain and soil are critical physical factors that influences both the form and the feasibility of the architectural design. So what to study in this case? The slope gradient. You have to if the slope that is there in the site has less than 3%, it is generally flat and it is easy to build with standard foundation and circulation. But if the slope is between 3 to 8%, that is the slope is moderate and allows for creative site planning through terracing and levels. You can create levels within the site or create terraces so that you use your site in optimum way. If the site has slope over 8%, so it demands advanced solutions like split level design, stilts and retaining walls. Also you have to determine the drainage and flood zones within the site. So based on the slope you will be able to understand where does water accumulates during rainy season. So if there is a possibility, you can drain out that water through the municipal sewers or drainage layouts with it present near to the site, or design the drainage layout in such a way that the water logging doesn't happen within your site, and also determine the flood zone, whether your site falls within the flood zone or not. If it is in flood zone, so either try to avoid that site, or if there is no other option, then you can go for stilt planning. Then there are different soil types like sandy, clay, loamy. So based on that the foundation and the structure detailing is done. Hazard zone, so based on the earthquake level or the landslide, the prone towards these natural disasters, you also assess the suitability of the site. So design implications in this case includes a steeply sloped site could inspire a split level or terrace design. Rocky terrain might offer visual drama, but significantly raise the excavation cost and construction time. Soil conditions may dictate the type of foundation, whether you are going for shallow or deep foundation, or if you are going for raft or pile foundation. All these are determined based on the site and the soil condition. Understanding climate and orientation, as already given you a glimpse about the importance of climate. So based on the climatic region of the site, the building design differs. So if you have seen a typical building that is there in Shimla or in Dehradun, it may not be as same as what we see here in central India like Bhopal or Varanasi, and that to a structure that we see in Kerala or in Tamil Nadu. So based on the climate of each and every region, the building or the vernacular building of the region differs, and that is what is being overlooked these days. So we should try to imbibe the climatic and climatic consideration of the project, so that the building doesn't it doesn't creates or it doesn't hamper the environment of that space. So the design strategies in this case would be to orient towards the long axis, that is east west, to reduce heat gain. But then this is only applicable for cities which experiences harsh summer, for example. But if your building is in very cold and sunny climatic region or cold and cloudy climatic region, so then probably your building has to orient towards the west, towards the south, north south axis, so that you are able to trap maximum sunlight. Position openings for prevailing winds to aid ventilation. Use courtyards, shading and buffer zones. Choose material for thermal performance and local suitability. So for this climatic and orientation data of the site, you can use sunpath diagram, windrows diagram, shadow analysis, or integrate climate and orientation for the environmental detail of your site. Then the other data to be collected is services and utilities. For any architectural project to function effectively, you must provide basic infrastructure services. So how and from which part or which direction of the site will you get these services? You have to gather this information. So where is municipal water supply available, or from which corner of the site you can allow the service water supply to enter the site. Sewage network, electricity grid, solid waste collection, internet and telecom access. So all these information has to be collected for your project respective the site. Then compatibility with the surroundings. A good site doesn't just work on its own, it fits with the meaningfully into the surrounding. So why it matters? Because site exists with a broader land use. So it is not just it is not somewhere located in an island. It has some context, it has some uses that are already there existing in and around the site. So those has to be understood, so that there is less of conflict after you design or after the building is executed. So avoid conflict and then promote synergy. Design tips include study user flow, traffic, noise and activity patterns near to your site. Consider day or night use and neighbor interactions near to the site. Show compatibility to prove that design is context aware and functional. So the site that you select and the project that you have selected should complement with each other. So for example, if you are designing an industry in a residential space, although it is not permissible within the land use, but still as a hypothetical site you are selecting that piece of land, so then it is not a good site to select, and always during the review process you will be asked or you will be questioned about the site selection strategy. So likewise, these are few strategies by which you can limit all these questions in your reviews. So to prepare the checklist of the site analysis parameters, it include contractual factors, data that have to be collected, functional factors and the contextual factors. So the recommended tools for further analysis include SWOT analysis, score metrics and then feasibility diagram. SWOT analysis is something which helps you to identify strength, weakness, opportunities and threat related to your site. Score metrics rates each site based on a key criteria like the factors that you have defined for your site analysis. So you will do a scoring and then you will select the optimum site that is available to you. Feasibility diagram, that is you visually map out the practical and design potential of the shortlisted site. So now let us conclude the presentation. Site selection is the foundation of thesis and crucial for architectural success. The understanding of 4 pillars, that is contractual, functional, contextual and design driven are very important in the detailed analysis of the site. So great architecture starts with the right site, one that is feasible, contextually rich and creatively inspiring. So in our next presentation we will understand about the analysis techniques, that is physical, environmental and the socio-cultural. We will understand the objectives of site analysis and then the physical aspects, the environmental aspects and the socio-cultural aspects of the site. So we will understand these details so that our site analysis is completed in detail. So these are further readings that are necessary for your project. So you can collect, you can refer these documents, because it will differ for the different projects and for the sites that you have selected for respective cities, and then collect this data, these sources, and then understand the details about your project based on the guidelines that are mentioned over there. So with this, I'd like to conclude this presentation, and thank you for your patience listening.